You're listening to I Have Some Notes, a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, locally grown, community supported.
Hey, Greg, I have a movie pitch for you. It's a satirical, nihilistic comedy about a comet heading directly towards Earth, and no one wants to do anything about it, but it's also loaded with like an all-star cast.
I don't care about that. According to Twitter, Tom Holland didn't get Zendaya anything for her birthday.
What? No, Greg, are you listening to me? This is a cool movie. Scott, do you want to hear my pitch movie? Comet coming to Earth. It's like a comedy, kind of Dr. Strangelove vibes.
No, I don't think that's going to play well with our target demographic.
Oh, you're really shooting yourself in the foot here, man. You need to listen to me.
Whoa, Liam. You're bringing a lot of negativity to me right now. I have some notes.
Welcome, everyone, to I Have Some Notes, the movie podcast with cuts, keeps, punch-ups, and tweaks on mediocre movies as suggested by you. I'm your host, Liam Creswick.
I'm Scott C. Bourgeois.
I'm Greg Beaver.
And today we are discussing the 2021 film Don't Look Up. It's 2021, by the way. We got, good lord. It's not 2021 anymore.
To be fair,
2022.
It kind of feels like 2020 still.
Yeah.
I said that with such enthusiasm, like it was an insight. Good lord. But yeah, it's happy New Year, fellas. It's one of those years.
About the same as 2020. Feels that way. It feels like we've kind of warped backwards into the beginning of the pandemic, so that's been fun. I've enjoyed that part of the Christmas holiday season.
Somebody posted a pandemic calendar that actually is still in 2020, and it's like the 568th day of 2020 or something since the pandemic started, of May since the pandemic started. So, seems appropriate.
Yeah, I saw that. That was pretty good. That was a pretty good gag.
Yeah, I mean, came into the new year, had a pretty decent holiday break, but busy, feeling a little drained, honestly, coming into this week. Not a very restful time off.
Yeah, there's a real, it's just sort of weird vibe in the air. The gestalt is ooky, you know?
Well, I took 2 weeks of vacation starting on like the 20th, and we had like a COVID scare in the middle of that sort of like fucked up our holiday. And so most of my 2-week vacation was spent stressing and worrying about passing along a virus to our parents and things like that. So yeah, I didn't really get any relaxation until about 3 days before New Year's. So I kind of feel like I need another vacation. I don't necessarily feel drained though. I did fit in quite a few movies during my vacation, which was kind of a bit refreshing. I was determined to watch some good ones, and I did. I watched Ghostbusters Afterlife, and that was pretty surprisingly good. Although I do think we could do it for the show as well. It's not far from
that
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually had a similar situation because Anita got a little bit sick before Christmas, and then she apparently passed it on to our young toddler daughter. And then, of course, her brother caught it, and then, of course, I caught it. So by early last week before, we were all pretty sick, and we ended up missing a bunch of Christmas stuff, and it's been an interesting time. Fortunately, not COVID, just everybody had a cold, but still, colds are miserable. So
yeah.
Speaking of miserable, I'm going to call this out now for our listeners. What I can only assume is a full game of like touch football is happening in the suite above mine. So if you hear weird rumblings and ramblings, my upstairs, anyone who lives in an apartment gets it, and anyone who lives in a house can sit there smug and pleased with themselves. But upstairs neighbors are being loud, and nothing I can do about it. So
No worries. I will try and cut out as much of it I can if I can.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I keep getting frustrated every time I see them, and so I raise my eyes to the roof in frustration, and I got to remind myself to don't look up.
Segue.
Killer segue.
Yeah, we're talking Don't Look Up, the very recent film that wasn't. So this season we've sort of aspired to take your suggestions for films. We got a big list of them, and if you got more, we'll add them to the list. We do a little vote on it on our social media, and that's the movie we do each week. But this movie coming into the new year was just so ding dang divisive. Had all the people talking. We thought, let's strike while the iron's hot. Let's strike while the algorithm's hot, and do a Don't Look Up episode. And we return to our regularly scheduled, voted on by you movies in the coming weeks. But
to be fair, we did ask the audience's permission.
Yes,
if we could do this movie.
Us to do it.
Yeah.
So. And I'm glad you said yes, because I might not have actually have watched this, even though it's kind of hyped. I might not have watched it had it not been for the podcast, and I mostly enjoyed it.
Yeah, I didn't hate it for sure.
I wasn't sure what to expect, and it was, I was seeing a lot of buzz about it, and the buzz was quite polarizing, which obviously made me think immediately of doing it for the show. And I also, I don't want to say that I found myself liking it reluctantly. Maybe just surprised that I was digging it so much. Particularly with how I think it's fair to say that this movie is obnoxious. But I kind of fell into the obnoxiousness a little bit and just kind of started to enjoy what it was laying down for me.
Yeah, about halfway through the movie, Anita turned to me and said, there's still over an hour left in this movie, and I don't know that I like it. And at the end of the movie, she turned to me and said, I liked the last hour and a bit of that movie. So somewhere in Act 2, it clicked for her, and she started to really enjoy it.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I actually found the experience of it to be its own little arc, At first I felt a little confused, then I felt a little frustrated, and then I started to settle in, and then by the end it was actually kind of sweet and poignant.
Yeah, I think that's apt, and there's part reading some of the discourse on this. There's a little part of me that I think a lot of people are trying to say the people who didn't like this film are trying to play it come at it with film criticisms, right? Performances over the top, too long. This was too on the nose, or too not funny enough. People keep saying it's not funny enough, and I think there's a good healthy layer of just you just didn't like that this is a hard pill to swallow, that this isn't a feel good funny movie. I think there's just a lot of people that didn't a lot of people who didn't like this movie, I feel had some Don't Look Up energy, they didn't want to look at the comet, wanted to be reminded that the comet's coming. Yeah. And especially because it ends on such a bummer. I think a lot of people too were the movie didn't end happy. It's it's not gonna.
No.
I think maybe this movie frustrated a lot of people with the overtop performances. The trouble is that was kind of the point. Mm-hmm. Is you're meant to be extremely frustrated. You're meant to feel the same things that you do when you watch the news every day.
Yeah, you're meant to really empathize with Dr. Mindy and Kate and Dr. Oglethorpe, for that matter, who are very reasonable people trying to do very reasonable things and are being obstructed at every turn by idiocy and short-sighted thinking and selfishness.
Absurdity. They are met with absurdity, which is, I feel one of the funniest criticisms I've seen levied against this movie of well, it's just the satire is so on the nose. It's so one-to-one. It's hard to satirize something that's already what's happening and is absurd. I'm I think that's the point. The fact that the president character is not that much of a stretch from the last president we had is the satire. Like, they don't have to heighten it. They just have to go like, look how easily this clicks in 1-to-1. Like,
yeah. I mean, they even get her to wear the hat. It's like,
and there's a million examples, not just her, of just like so much of what they're implying with the like, okay, it's not a comet, it's climate change, it's COVID, it's whatever. The 1-to-1 on the nosedness of it, I think, is the point, is the satire. But
yeah,
again, I've seen a lot of...
I think I agree with you, and I like, which I think makes repitching this movie exceedingly difficult, because those are also the things that I found distasteful about the movie, right?
Okay.
Like, it's because it is frustrating you on purpose, and like my normal instinct would be like, okay, well, let's scrap that and make this movie more palatable. But I'm genuinely unsure how the second half of this show is going to go because of that.
Yeah.
Oh, I have some tweaks. I have some things that I didn't like in the movie that I would change.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I have a few too, but I think it is that, like, just that inclination you have of like, how do we make this more palatable? Again, is kind of the message of the movie, because how many times throughout the movie do they say, like, you need media training, you need to put a more positive, we try to keep things fun here on the morning show, this is a fun podcast, guys, let's talk about fun, nice thing, right? Like,
yeah, I'm worried that I would fall into that sort of movie critic valley where this, like, I want the movie to show me what I want to see, and like, that's not necessarily what makes a good movie. Like, a good movie, just throws something at you and then makes you deal with it, right? I think that's in large part why a lot of blockbusters don't necessarily end up being that particularly memorable, is because they are trying to give you what they think you want to see, and when that's just not interesting at all, right?
Yeah. Let's for anyone who may not be familiar, because this also broke like Blockbuster. Oh no, sorry. This also broke Netflix like watch records. So I'm assuming most people listening to this have seen it, but just in case you haven't, also spoilers, obviously. But just the details, of course, came out this year or last year, 2021. I did it again, damn it. Don't Look Up's from 2021, directed by Adam McKay, of both The Big Short and Anchorman fame. Did all those Will Ferrell movies in the aughts, and then went on to do like Big Short and Vice, which I also really liked Vice. And then, of course, stars Leonardo DiCaprio as Dr. Randall Mindy, Jennifer Lawrence as Kate DiBiase, who the comet's named after, Meryl Streep as the President Orlean, as well as Cate Blanchett, Rob Morgan, Jonah Hill, Mark Rylance, Tyler Perry, Timothy Chalamet. Embarrassment of riches.
Just a stacked cast.
Yeah. Let's just throw to the trailer now, so we can get back into discussing this, because lots to cover.
This is not real. This is not real. This is not real. This isn't happening. Kate, tell me this isn't really happening.
I hear there's something you don't like the looks of.
We discovered a very large comet.
Oh, good for you.
It's headed directly towards Earth.
This comet is what we call a planet killer.
At this exact moment, I say we sit tight and assess.
Sit tight and assess?
Sit tight.
And then assess. The sit tight part comes first, then you gotta digest it. That's the assessment period.
This is the worst news in the history of humanity. He just blew us off.
What are we gonna do? We have to release the information.
So we just leak it.
Our guests today have made a pretty big discovery in space.
How big is this thing, though? Like, can it destroy my ex-wife's house? Is that possible?
There's a 100% chance that we're all going to die.
Hey.
Well, the handsome astronomer can come back anytime, but the yelling lady, not so
much.
Kate DiBiase, an astronomy grad student, and her professor, Dr. Randall Mindy, make an astounding discovery. A new comet the size of Mount Everest. The problem? It's on a direct collision course with Earth. The other problem? No one seems to care. Turns out warning mankind about a planet killer is an inconvenient pill to swallow. Kate and Dr. Mindy embark on a quest which takes them from the office of an indifferent president to the airwaves of an upbeat morning show, trying to get people to do something. With only 6 months until the comet makes impact, managing the 24-hour news cycle and gaining the attention of the social media-obsessed public before it's too late proves shockingly comical.
Yeah, that summary comes from IMDb. I didn't write that. I usually take a piss out of the movies, but for whatever reason, I just felt like it was better just to lay the markers out clearly before we get into the discussion. Plus, I didn't want to try and make jokes about a movie that's patently absurd. It felt like it would be very difficult for me to be able to do that.
No, that's valid. Did either of you think this movie was funny? Because again, some of the discourse I have read is like, it's not funny, and I'm like, how do you feel funniness?
I think that there are definitely funny parts of it. Not all of the jokes landed for me personally, and that's just individual taste, I would assume. But overall, like, I found it pretty funny. But I also have a pretty dark sense of humor, so.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I know that I laughed out loud once, and it was some joke that by Jonah Hill, and it had something to do with social media. But even at this point, I don't remember it, so I guess it wasn't as funny as I remembered it. So yeah, it's I don't remember being it tickling my funny bone a whole lot.
Let's put this in perspective for you. I found The Big Short funny.
Yeah.
For very similar reasons to why I found this movie funny. And it's not funny, haha, it's funny, cringe, oh God, we're all going to die. Because the alternative is to cry.
Yeah.
But that's the way the humor was hitting me in this movie, and that's why I'm likening it to The Big Short, which again, I also thought was a funny movie.
I also if you watch the Hannah Gatsby special, speaking of Netflix originals, she talks about the thing in comedy of like drawing up tension, winding up tension, and releasing it. And I feel like a lot of the moments in this that were funny were less so much like make you laugh out loud, haha, and more like take some of the tenseness and at the right time give you a little release that's like more of a back to normal than a elated ha ha ha. Like when she ends up with the bag on her head a second time, like she's just, the scene cuts, she's got the bag on her head and the two of them are leading in the car door like, sorry, you shouldn't have done that, Kate. Like little cuts in the editing, little like tonal shifts, I thought kept it from being a full-blown morose tragedy.
I quite liked the fact that she was hung up for 6 months on the fact that this general grifted them at the White House. Like, she keeps bringing up the fact that this general stiffed them for $20.
You know what I love about the general bit? Not only was it a funny thing that we get, like every act had a reference to the general, how the general charged them for snacks, which was funny. It's also these little details that I think a lot of people maybe overlook, that this movie had a lot of details. It's that whole interaction with the general is foreshadowing the fact that people with privileged information will use it to profit every time.
Yep.
Yeah.
They learn in the first trip to the White House that they are going to get sold out for money by people who know more than them. And it's also a recurring joke. There's subtlety. The humor in this is a little more like subtle and pace wise than like full blown punchline. And for that, I liked it.
See, I'm not sure that I entirely agree with that, because there's like, particularly in the first White House scene, like, I know, you're meeting the president and the chief of staff, and their reaction to the news that there's a comet heading straight for Earth that's an extinction level event is patently absurd. I mean, she's worried about there being how it'll affect the midterms and things like that. Yeah. And Jonah Hill's character is just completely dismissive. But I get the sense that like the way that scene is written. I felt like I was supposed to be laughing at the things that like Jonah Hill and Meryl Streep were saying, but I wasn't. And like this is part of the ride that I was on for the movie, because I found them so obnoxious and frustrating that I was a little. It felt like a little bit like tonal whiplash, because the start of the film was, you know, fairly straight. You know, there's kind of like a little bit of a funny bit where they're freaking out about the fact that like the comet is heading straight for Earth. But again, like I wasn't laughing at it. It didn't really work for me on a comedy level, but I did feel like the movie thought it did, you know? And so it took me a while to settle into the kind of, I think, purposeful tonal whiplash that the movie kept laying down.
Do you think that scene would be funnier on a second watch?
I don't know. They're really obnoxious, Liam. Like, I
thought they were hilarious.
Here's the thing. For me, part of the humor with the scenes with Jonah Hill and Meryl Streep wasn't what they were doing. It was the reactions of the reasonable people to what they were doing. What they were doing was inherently obnoxious and ridiculous, and the reasonable people around them reacting like reasonable people was where, for me, the humor came from.
Yeah. See, and I thought they were just like, yep, there are people walking around in our world right now who, upon hearing this news, would say these incredibly obnoxious and absurd things. And to me, that was what was funny. I'm like, this is believably obnoxious. All of this checks out. That, like someone going, oh, so it's not 100%, it's 97%. Okay, so then there's it's like, come on, man.
You're from Michigan State? Yeah, let's get some Harvard people on this.
Let's get some Harvard people. Yeah, like the whole, yeah. So again, the word tone has come up a bit. Do you think maybe that's where some of, like you were Greg, you were discussing like having to settle into it.
Yeah.
Getting on board with the like weird tone. Scott, you had a great observation before we started recording that I'd love you to share again. Anchorman and The Big Short.
Yeah, it's when the nickel didn't drop until I saw that it was written and directed by Adam McKay, who also did The Big Short and Anchorman, literally spelt out in the little script we have in front of me. When I was like, oh, The Big Short and Anchorman, that explains why it kind of almost feels like there are two movies happening at the same time sometimes, because some of the characters, like the president and her son and Mark Rylance's character, Peter Isherwell, feel like they're characters out of Anchorman, whereas the more reasonable characters, like Kate and Dr. Mindy and Dr. Oglethorpe, feel like they're characters out of The Big Short, and they've somehow ended up in the same movie and are bouncing off of one another.
Mm-hmm. And that also, yeah, I would agree with that. And also, I feel like that every day of my life, that I'm dealing with absurdly stupid, narcissistic, selfish people all around me, and especially in power. Like, the world is run by Ron Burgundy's. Like, it's
You can't see Greg and I both nodding to what Leo just said.
Yeah,
I
think that's the tragedy of the film, is just, and I think that is kind of what makes, in the end, that's what made it work so well for me. Is that we're following Randall Mindy as he's kind of being pulled in by the absurdity, and he sort of eventually kind of embraces it.
It's because his character is very much I'll try to work with the system.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so he ends up selling out more and more and more because he thinks he can help, up until the point where he realizes he's never going to be able to. He has his heel realization.
He's the centrist.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah. But
it's interesting.
It's interesting to me because Kate is very much like the polar opposite of Meryl Streep's character. She's very grounded. She's very reasonable. She's also very clearly on the opposite end of the political spectrum. And she's portrayed as someone who keeps putting her foot in her mouth. Like, she could be trying to make friends to help save the world, but instead she keeps belittling and insulting people. Which I thought was interesting. That was an actual character thing where I was like, "Oh, she's actually not helping herself." Like, because she can't help but call these people stupid because they're stupid, and she has no
filter.
filter.
That itself could be a fairly reasonable criticism of the left as well. If that's who her character is supposed to be.
Yeah, just the fact that they had two main characters and each one kind of goes their own way, I think was a canny choice, better than just trying to do it with one scientist banging his head against the wall.
Yeah. Well,
and the two sort of reactions.
Well, and neither Mindy nor Kate's reactions are perfect. Like, both of them make bad decisions in the movie. And I think that's also very humanizing and realistic for them, because at one point Kate just gives up.
Yeah.
And like kind of embraces nihilism for a while. And she snaps out of it around the same time that Dr. Mindy gets his head out of his butt too. But, and then of course he falls into the celebrity culture and ends up having an affair and tries to work with a system that's just, it's not a functional system, and he thinks he can somehow work within it. So yeah, they both take their own path, but they also both make bad decisions along the way.
Yeah. And for Dr. Mindy, like it eventually leads to the most cathartic moment of the movie when he is finally on the Daily Rip, the fake Fox News show, and just loses it.
He has his network moment.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
I'm mad as hell.
Yeah, like it really, like, for me, it's just like the kind of thing that you wish a reasonable politician would do. At a certain point, it would you just please freak out about this a little bit and just tell people like it is.
I think that's why I like this movie so much. The whole thing, even though it's like it doesn't offer any solutions, just the fact that Adam McKay and company were gesturing wildly at everything around us in the form of a movie. I'm like, thank God someone else sees this, because I feel like I'm in
you feel like you're taking crazy pills.
Yeah, I feel like I'm taking, like, everyone else is losing their mind, and it was just cathartic to see other people be like, look at how stupid everyone else is being, and yeah.
I saw a few, mentioned it earlier, criticisms of the movie who thought the ending was a bummer, and it is, in the sense that humanity is lost, the world ends, and it is hit by the big massive comet. But I kind of disagree that, like, it's a detriment. And I actually think that the ending is kind of hopeful for me, because the last scene is this sort of beautiful scene where Leonardo DiCaprio's family are sitting down to dinner, and Kate DiBiase shows up, and Teddy Oglethorpe show up, and they're all having like this one last nice meal together. And there's this moment about where they talk about the effort that they put in to stop the comet, and there's a moment where they said, boy, did we try, and like, yeah, oh man, did we ever try. And that was the part that was really uplifting to me, is that no one gave up, like, even in the face of overwhelming odds, and in the face of overwhelmingly horrible leadership and banging your heads against the wall, like, everyone kept trying as hard as they could to fix the problem. And even in failure, there is redemption in that. And that to me is the true message of the movie, you know?
Yeah, it's the same reason Rocky's good.
They go out with dignity
It
in
doesn't
a way.
even win the boxing match. It's a bummer. sorry, Scott.
The heroes of the movie go out with their humanity and their dignity intact in a way that the villains don't. And I think that's telling of where the movie stands on what's going on. And it is kind of a beautiful final scene with them, honestly. And I quite liked it. I have issues with the ending that I will address, but I quite liked it.
I also have issues with the literal ending.
Yeah.
But yeah, that scene, I like that much read on it much better than my read on it, Greg. Because as much as I was been going to bat for this movie for the last 20 minutes, your interpretation of it, I think, is much more wholesome than what I took away with it, which is just like, mine was much more of a kind of a Christmas Carol vibe of like, if we all continue to either act stupidly and absurdly or let stupid, absurd people run roughshod over our world, the best we can hope for is to gather our meager wealth, enjoy it, and then die with our family in hand. That's if we let this keep happening, that's our best case scenario. Which again, I felt I took a little sort of like nihilistic catharsis in, but your reading I like that much better than just like.
I can be an optimist at times. Yeah.
You know, we've talked a little bit about Meryl Streep and Jonah Hill, and we have yet to actually talk about Mark Rylance as Peter Isherwell, tech bro billionaire, who is somehow
the marriage of Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, and
Elon
Jeff
Musk
Bezos
and Jeff Bezos. Yeah, he's every tech bro. He's every bad trait from every tech bro rolled into one. It's fantastic. And I loved his portrayal. Number one, I love that he's basically running the government. Like he walks in and then like calls President Orlean to heel like a dog. He's incredibly all of his decisions are short-sighted, which is perfect. He's full of crap. Like he's like, oh, I'm a visionary and I'm gonna make the world better and we're gonna get rid of inequality. Yeah, but you've retained the rights to mine all of that precious ore for yourself. You've cut out everybody else. So how is that wealth being spread around? And he's wrong. That's the best part, is he's wrong when he tells Dr. Mindy he's going to die alone. He's wrong.
Yeah. I forgot about that. Fuck yeah. There's so many little payoffs in this movie, little things they set up and pay off.
Because Dr. Mindy dies with his loved ones and his friends.
That is actually the one joke that I really appreciated, because it had a long setup. It feels like a throwaway line where he says that we can, our app can predict how you die, and then he tells President Orlean that like you're gonna get killed by a Bronterox. We don't know what that means. And like, again, like that's sort of foreshadowing into the fact that like this company is actually incompetent. And then of course at the end of the movie, then when they do arrive on another planet, she gets killed by what they assume is called a Bronterox. And I did like that joke. Liam is sneering. I don't think he.
My notes involve changing that joke entirely.
As do mine, in fact.
Just to pay off a different detail that I liked better. So,
okay, and I think that there should be a different fate for the rich people, personally. But
yeah.
I don't know. I was fine with them going to a planet and dying. That's works for me.
I mean, I love that their plan is still short-sighted and stupid, because even Isherwell's plan B, get on a sleeper ship and go to another planet, is like half the people die on the way. They land with like no tools, no infrastructure. They're not even wearing any clothes. They didn't check the oxygen content of the planet before they disembarked from the ship. And they're all old people. How are they going to repopulate the human race? They're all old rich people. It's terrible. It's a terrible plan. And I will admit, I do like that, but I still want to change the ending.
Well, sounds like now's as good a time as any to get into our changes. We'll be back after some message from the Alberta Podcast Network with our fixes, keeps, cuts, and what have yous for Don't Look Up.
Taproot publishes weekly roundups on a variety of topics, including media, food, tech, health innovation, arts, music, regional news, business, and city council. Taproot's curators gather up the headlines and happenings on these files and deliver them directly to your inbox. You can get one or two for free. If you want more, become a Taproot member, then you can get as many as you want, plus other perks for just $10 a month or $100 a year. Get more information right now at taprootedmonton.ca.
Welcome back to I Have Some Notes. I'd actually like to start off, since we were talking about the Bronterock joke. I don't have a lot of notes for this movie. I don't know how to chain, like, so much of it I feel clicks together and is, like, if nothing else, part of the creator's vision, be it Adam McKay or just the crew at large. That I feel like it's a bit of a Jenga puzzle if you try to pull too many pieces out, other things fall. So my notes are pretty minor. So, the Bronterock joke. I like it. I also get why they ended on that, like because the ending is such a bummer, like they all die at dinner. Having sort of the villains get their comeuppance in a lighthearted way, I think was a nice, like, sweet palate cleanser for the dark ending.
Kind of lifts you back up a little bit.
I was talking about that, like, it's not haha funny, but it, like, brings you back to neutral.
Fair.
To that. That being said, one of my favorite details in this movie was that Meryl Streep's character, President Orlean, smokes. They talk about how she smokes a whole bunch, and that's just a great detail. Of course, I don't want a smoker in charge of climate change. That's a very fatalistic behavior. That is clearly someone who is knowingly taking actions that is shortening their lives and does not seem to care. No offense to any of our smoker listeners, but also you know. I also smoke cannabis. I'm not that far behind you. But, like, it's a fatalistic behavior to smoke. So, great detail with that character. I loved it. I feel like you could have got the same Bronterock joke without the word Bronterock and just been like, okay, when she's like, okay, tell me how I die. And he's like, oh, lung failure. And she's like, I'm a smoker, I guess. Yeah, okay, fuck, sure. And then she dies of lung failure, but it's not because of, lung poisoning or lung cancer. Either the cryo malfunctions, and literally she has no oxygen, or they get to the planet and there is no oxygen, or there's like she breathes in. I think she just breathes in a weird flower that rots her lungs.
Yeah.
Or like a smoke monster or something, and it's the same payoff. It's the same, like, we see her die the way he told her he would die, but it just, like, keeps the she's a smoker ball in the air, because that was just a nice detail.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean that also works. Like if the planet has no oxygen, I guess that also works because you want all of the rich people to die in the end rather than being killed by alien creatures or whatever. They just all suffocate or something like that. It might be, I guess visually that might be.
That's why I like the flower.
Maybe,
I think instead of them getting their face bit by a weird alien, they just, like, breathe these weird flowers and then.
Sure,
fall over dead.
Yeah,
I think they should have blown up 22,000 years earlier. Because my pitch for the ending is that, like, everything we've seen is that what's the name of the tech company?
Bash.
Bash's technology is the exact same kind of, like, consumer technology that we experience today. So it's all kind of designed to fail in one way or another. And I think that the starship should have taken off and then should have promptly been struck by a piece of comet and crashed back to Earth.
Yeah, if the comet drills didn't work, why did the spaceship 22,000-year-old arc work?
Well, and who would have launched that arc for them? Who are they leaving behind who's willing to take one for the boss and his rich friends? I think that the ship should have taken off, and then it should have been struck by a piece of comet and started to careen out of control, and then we could have cut to people inside freaking out and asking Peter Isherwell to fix it, and him be like, I don't know how to fix stuff, I'm a visionary. And then they crash, and then they also die on Earth, where they should have died with everyone else.
Yeah.
That's my pitch for how the villains should have gotten their comeuppance. But I mean, being eaten by an alien monster is still pretty funny.
Yeah, still fun aspect.
Yeah. I think that's fine. I would have just been. I was actually expecting them to get smacked by an asteroid, to be honest with you. So I was a bit surprised when I was like, they're actually getting away. This is horrible.
And I think it's for that reason we said it, so that at least it ends on this, like, you know, naked Meryl Streep getting eaten by an alien. It has some levity to it.
Yeah.
One other thing that was kind of missing for me from the ending is I really would have liked to have caught up with more of the secondary characters that we meet throughout. Like, I want to find out what happened to Kate's ex. I want to find out what happened to the New York Herald people who dismissed their story because it wasn't getting enough clicks. I want to find out what happened to the celebrity couple that threw the concert. Like, I wanted to revisit. I wanted to find out what happened to the general that stiffed them. Like, I would have liked to have revisited all those people in their final moments and seen what they were up to as well, not just the news team and a handful of other people.
That's a fair point. I forgot that, they drop the ex-boyfriend pretty quickly. The second he, like, throws her under the bus, that's the last we hear of him.
And I would have liked to have seen what he was doing in those final minutes after having, like, squandered 6 months chasing clicks. Like...
Yeah. Same with that army general. Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of side characters just get
forgotten. Or the director of NASA, who you know was left behind. She did not make it onto that arc. I would have liked to have caught up with more of them. I think that there was time that the movie could have devoted to, as the comet was crashing, to showing us what they're doing in their final minutes as well.
I have a question for you guys, and it's just. The reason I'm asking it, because I'm just wondering if I was watching the movie bad. Dr. Mindy's relationship to his wife, did it seem like a happy relationship at first? Is it, do I remember that correctly? Like, was there any sort of like indication that it was a fraught relationship for any particular reason?
No. I read it as a dude who's kind of having a midlife crisis and a level of celebrity at the same time. Like, he's away from his family in DC doing all this work. He's getting older. He's maybe a little bored with his relationship. And I think that was kind of hinted at a little bit. And suddenly he's America's sexiest scientist. He's on all the TV programs, and this rich, famous television producer is openly flirting with him, and he makes a bad decision in the moment because he's kind of swept up in it. That's kind of how I read that, and it was a believable failure on his part for me to have been in a happy relationship and screwed it up because it's the short-sighted thing, and he's falling in with the short-sighted people, right?
Oh yeah, I'm fully on board for that arc. And
you were talking about
I just don't know if it would have worked a tiny bit better if we had a little bit more time with the wife and Dr. Mindy, just so that sorry, I don't remember the wife's character name at all. But the like it just felt like when they finally do like start making out, Kate Blanchett and Leonardo DiCaprio, it's like it felt slightly out of left field for me. And I realized that like she's rubbing his leg or whatever during one of the telecasts, like right before that, but like I still wasn't like I took Leonardo DiCaprio's reaction to it to be like, because he's kind of like a scared wiener. Mm-hmm. And like he still seemed like a scared wiener there. I didn't like. It read to me like he wouldn't react to. He wouldn't push her away because he's too afraid to. Because he's that much of a kind of nervous wreck, nervous coward. So when he does make out with her, I was kind of like, oh okay. And then it felt like he went from 0 to 100, buying into the bullshit really quickly. And there's something about that flow that didn't work as well as I would like it to. Like I think I would have appreciated kind of like maybe a little bit more subtle build of it and maybe some more foreshadowing of it.
You feel like maybe there's a plot point missing somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Or even just more early on establishment of a great relationship with his wife. Because they don't show you much of what him and his wife are like together before she starts, even before the newscaster gets involved. She's like, hey pal, you've been on the internet all day. I'm going to go for a walk. You want to go for a walk? And you're like,
but
no, I'm not going for a walk.
Foreshadowing. Yeah. That's foreshadowing the way their relationship is going, because she's still invested and he's more interested in being online and talking to his followers. And that shows the direction that he's going and how he's pulling away from her. That's the foreshadowing right there. Right?
I guess I'm saying I want to see more of what came before that, of just them being happy together, so that we had the contrast.
That's fair. That's reasonable.
Either that or that we get a bit more of a sense that they're struggling, like so many of us are. I mean, they are sort of that avatar for the average person as well in this movie. So, if they're not necessarily struggling just in their relationship wise, but if there's some conflict between them, just in trying to make ends meet or trying to raise their boys in the best way, something like that. Could, you add that subtle little bit of tension. Doesn't mean that they have to be in a poor relationship. They can be in a good relationship, but still, struggling a little bit. And then that turn later on makes a little bit more sense. Mm-hmm. Like this is honestly pretty minor. Like most I'm not. This reminds me of when we did Die Hard 2, and I spent most of that episode like not really wanting to change anything because I thought it was fine. This is kind of how I feel about this one.
I will say, I will say that I think Leonardo DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence are both very good in this movie. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Actually, I think all the cast is really good. I don't think there's anybody who falls flat in this. There are definitely some people who are playing more obnoxious than others, but
yeah. Like I would normally criticize the over the top performances, but like it's just a part of the movie. Like it's just what it's laying down. Like you take
completely rational.
Yeah, if you take that out, you kind of start missing the point.
Yeah. Which is again why the only other one fix I have is again it's not a small detail, but it has nothing to do with like character or beats or anything. But one thing that stuck out to me near the end, it's revealed that I think it's like Russia, India, China, India, China, and what's that?
Russia, India, China, and the EU.
And the EU all make their own attempt to blow the comet up, and then something malfunctions and they fail to do so. Which then leads to like, well, now our only hope is this Bash Enterprise thing, which then fails and everyone dies. The turn of like, we're gonna blow this comet up, wait, cancel the mission, there's money to be made, I think is such a pervasive problem across the world that rarely will you hear me go to bat for America, but like it seems weird to pin it on one American company and the puppet president they have. And so I would go ahead, Scott, before I get into it. What?
Oh, I was just going to counterpoint that it's very clear that the president
just like damning and provocative. That's the word I'm thinking. If right at the 0 hour before India goes to launch their own version of the diversion tactic, Bash cuts them a deal and gives them some of the mining rights, because like China, India, the EU, Russia, they're all just as bad for when it like if this is a big climate change allegory, they're all just as bad. Like they're all equally a problem. It's the global north. Like everyone in the global north is responsible for climate change. And so having them get cut into the money deal at the end instead of just, oops, it failed, I think just would have like driven the point home a little better.
I think it's kind of telling though that part of the story is that the USA has the best chance to stop this early on and very nearly succeeds, and then pulls the plug at almost literally the last second because there's money to be made. And then the best efforts of everyone else fails because of that. I think that that's kind of ties into it as well. Because if
Fair.
the one major global superpower is not doing the thing, it doesn't really matter what everyone else is doing.
I guess just like at this point in history, China has just as good a chance to stop a comet as America does. If anything, I would have loved to have seen all the global north buy into this "let's mine it instead" thing and have all the like, you know, Cuba and Chile are trying their best to like cobble together an aversion tactic, and it fails because they have no resources. Because the global superpowers, China, Russia, US, have colluded against them. I just thought it was weird that like America's the only ones with their heads up their ass. And if this is a climate change analogy, unfortunately, America is not the only ones with their heads up their ass. And
I will.
I think
China
because you're coming at it from a Canadian perspective, that criticism certainly makes sense. I think when you think about this being an American movie, centered on Americans and centered on specifically their most recent issues with telling the truth and facts and things like that. Like I think it makes sense that they are the most at fault.
Fair.
Partly because because of the view of that country, that they're the shining city on the hill for democracy and stuff like that. And to have to sit through this movie where, they are failing spectacularly, willfully, I think is probably a little bit more poignant for Americans than maybe it is for us. I don't know.
There's, to kind of piggyback on that, Greg, there's also the fact that because it's made by Americans, and it's about, as you say, recent American problems, there's the perception that the rest of the world doesn't like them because of this exact attitude. And so framing it that way by showing them being at their worst and the rest of the world being like, the hell, I think is kind of part of the point.
Sure. That's fair.
But I mean, fair, still a fair statement.
We just keep introducing edits and then walking them, finding reasons to walk them back.
It's like we're dissecting the movie as we go, and we keep finding a new thing. Oh, look at this! Look at this kidney.
Oh no, that's a load bearing plot point. It's like I was saying, it's like a Jenga tower.
Yeah. Well, and you've pointed out even yourself, Liam, that there's a lot of foreshadowing in the early part of the movie that all pays off later on. It's actually a pretty intricately plotted film, and there was some thought put into like. This ties into this later, and this foreshadows this later, and this pays off this from way back when. And I mean, I appreciate that. That makes for a good script overall, and makes it hard to nitpick.
Yeah,
it sure does.
They also set a lot of the plot points, like the big plot points, are kind of simple. Like what would happen? Like it's pretty on the like. People keep saying it's like so on the nose. It's like if a comet was 6 months away, it would kill us all. And we would because we're all absurd idiots.
This wouldn't be Armageddon.
Yeah, there's no...
Yeah, it's a movie that's, just sort of trying to grapple with the idea that not everything is going to be okay. And I think all of us are trying to wrap our heads around that to one degree or another. And maybe that's why it puts so many people off. Because it's definitely not a nice thing to think about. That's
why Facebook has that button that says I'm in this picture and I don't like it.
I've seen a lot of people compare this movie to Dr. Strangelove, and it makes me wonder, like, so far removed from when Dr. Strangelove came out, and I honestly haven't really looked into it. How was that movie received in its time? Because it's very much in the same wheelhouse where it's like, not everything might be okay, and the people who are in charge, who we're expecting to protect us, are very deeply stupid, and probably can't if one thing goes wrong. And that's kind of the same. Like, I see the comparison between that movie and this one. And so I'm wondering, like, 10, 15 years down the road, will people be looking back much more favorably on this movie than they are right now, where it's deeply polarizing? Did people at the time think Doctor Strangelove was a little on the nose and a little fatalistic and not really to their taste? Because Doctor Strangelove is a very funny movie and deeply dark and disturbing. Like,
yeah, I can't remember who I was talking to, but I was talking to someone about the comparison to Doctor Strangelove, and they had said that like Doctor Strangelove was made in a less absurd time, and at first I was like, yeah, that's fair, and then I started to think about it, and I was like, was it? Though, like, I mean, at the time, like, you're thinking about, like, you know, people were living with sort of the same existential crisis that we are now, where, you know, we've got any number of potentially world-ending crises, you know, staring us dead in the eyes, and that was sort of the same in the 50s and 60s, obviously, with the nuclear proliferation, right? And of course you have the Red Scare and stuff like that. So there was like a lot of like deeply polarizing politics going on at the same time, and people, being, accused of being traitors and stuff like that. And just like, it, you know, in some ways it's like, was it really that much more absurd? And I guess like my conclusion is like, maybe not too much, but, you know, it's hard to say. I guess you have to ask a boomer to be sure.
Yeah, I thought I could Google Doctor Strangelove reviews from 1964 and get a glimpse of it to answer this question in real podcast time.
They have those on Metacritic, right? You can find those on Rotten Tomatoes.
I found one. No, I did find a variety one, but I'm like, oh, I can't read a whole movie review while podcasting, so this doesn't help me. But that's just a really good question. I hadn't thought of that, Scott. I like that.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. I could be. It could have been. There could have been rave reviews for it when it came out. It's a Stanley Kubrick movie starring Peter Sellers. Like, but
this is an Adam McKay movie starring DiCaprio.
Yeah,
like it's
maybe history will be kind to it. Who's to say? Yeah. Were our listeners kind to it?
Yeah, let's. I loved the comments to this one. Reading your comments because divisive indeed. Of course, if you want us to read and discuss your comments submitted by you, please follow us on Twitter at I Have Some Notes, on Instagram at I Have Some Notes Pod, and don't use Facebook. But if you do, look up I Have Some Notes and follow us on Facebook.
I just want to say one quick thing before you get started on the comments. I curated these a little bit. We got a lot of responses to this movie. So I'm sorry if your comment didn't make the cut. There was just way too much good stuff, so I couldn't fit everything.
Valid. But don't let that stop you for next time. Because there's other movies we do where we're like, please, someone comment.
Yeah, the next time we do Splash or something like that.
Does anyone have thoughts on Dungeons and Dragons?
Did anyone see it?
At Dima says, I think it could have been more on the nose.
Could it have?
Which I'm going to assume was said with irony. But it was very on the nose. But again, every time I've seen that criticism come up, I go to bat that like that's the point.
Yeah,
that you can 1-to-1 this with climate change and COVID, and it's like this movie does in 6 months what we all have done for the last 3 decades and will for the next one.
It's a feature, not a bug.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. The on the nose satire is the point, in my opinion. But obviously some folks disagreed, both Dima and other critics. And let's see what else. See what other comments we have here. Braden Young says, some parts were good, some were okay. I felt the climax could have been a little better, but DiCaprio was a highlight for sure.
He's good. He gets to do his yelling thing, which is always when DiCaprio's at his best, when he just like screams and freaks out.
Yeah. I'm not a huge I like DiCaprio when he's in a movie. He's not like a draw for me, but I'm never like, oh, this fucking guy. But he's also not really a draw. Has he ever played like a wormy loser, or is he always some version of like a confident cool guy?
He's played a variety of roles over the years, and nothing's admittedly jumping to mind, but I
like other than obviously
like
Gilbert Grape, but he was like 14.
Yeah,
so
I feel like he
count.
must have at some point, because he's done a lot.
Yeah.
We've put us on the spot.
Because I cannot think of one. Like, I'm going through any DiCaprio movie I can think of, and it's like he's not a wormy put upon loser too often. So, yeah.
I will say Wolf of Wall Street demonstrated to me that Leonardo DiCaprio had comedic chops that I didn't expect, and he brings some of that to bear here. And I appreciated that. I really liked him in this movie, and I really liked his character in this movie.
At I Hate Your Taste says, surprising. Not because Leo isn't always good, but because it was a different kind of role for him, and I didn't expect it.
There you go.
Case in point.
What we were just discussing there. Chris says, I just don't think that the world needed a gritty reboot of Up right now.
I don't think this could be a more opposite movie than Up.
Yeah. Levi Breederland says, well, I enjoyed it. I felt like the political caricaturing was a bit heavy-handed.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the same thing that we've sort of talked about almost the entire show. Yeah. It's, and I totally understand why this movie put people off, even though, I think that the movie was ultimately making the right choices. I get why there's frustration with it. Yeah. And if you didn't like it, don't worry, that's fine. Like you're not out to lunch, if it's, if it was just a bit too much to take, that's understandable to me.
I mean, I feel like if you didn't like this movie, I want you to like stop and really ask yourself, did you not like it because the performances were too hammy, or you didn't like it because it's a stark reminder that we're more or less doomed unless we all get our shit together yesterday. I feel like, if you dig deep and you're like, no, hammy acting, I stand by it, then so be it.
Yeah.
But Olav Rockney says, seemed a little overly optimistic in its outlook, needed more cynicism.
Yeah, Olav saw the beautiful humanity in the final scene with Dr. Mindy and Kate and the family and Dr. Oglethorpe, and was like, no, that's way too uplifting.
Herman of the Modern Manhood podcast says, it's kind of good. That's it. J-Law was too much for me. Jonah Hill was the funniest character. I would be inclined to agree with that. I don't know. The commentary was just so heavy-handed that it's hard to judge characters' actions accordingly honestly. It was fun, though.
I did ask him about that. His comment on J-Law. I was asking him if J-Law is just too much for him in this movie, because I felt like she's pretty subdued in this movie at the most.
Yeah.
He said that like he just doesn't. Yeah, he's not a fan in general. So that's where that comment comes from.
That's fair. Clerk says, I think they failed to tell all the truth, but tell it slant. I'm not sure. Have you heard that expression before? Is that like an idiom I'm not familiar with?
I'll look it up.
You got me.
I'm not taking this again for audio or editing reasons. I'll just say it again so that everyone can follow along here with Clerk's comment. I think they failed to, quote, tell all the truth, but tell it slant. I felt bored most of the time, and obviously very on the nose. That being said, Ari's performance of Just Look Up deserves a Grammy.
Big fan of Ariana Grande.
Mm-hmm.
So
that was a nice touch. The Live Aid looking thing at the end.
It's so Tell All the Truth, Tell It Slant is an Emily Dickinson poem, kind of talking about you should tell the truth, but you should come at it from like another angle, because the actual truth is a little too much for most people to handle. So you kind of want to sneak it in from the side, whereas this movie's just kind of right up in your face about it. I think that's kind of where Clerk is coming from.
That's fair. Cool. Well, I didn't know that idiom, and I'm gonna have to disagree. I think they nailed it. But also, thank you for getting me hip to that little nugget of wisdom from, you said Emily Dickinson?
Emily Dickinson.
Sweet. Cinematological, our friend Robin over at Cinematological says, prime example of why you can't satirize the absurd. Would have been better with jokes. Needed more banal evil and less mustache twirling.
That's kind of a fair observation. And my knee-jerk reaction was that the bad guys in the movie, the president, the tech billionaire, are a little too nakedly evil. And maybe maybe them being a little more subdued in their evil would have played better. But the more I dwelt on it and just talking with you guys, the more I'm like, no, I think the point was that they're supposed to be obnoxious. Yeah. They're supposed to be over the top. They're supposed to be so nakedly on the face, selfish, narcissistic, and short-sighted that anyone with 2 brain cells should see it, and yet people are willfully ignorant of it.
I mean, like, today we're recording this on January 6th, so like, you know, this is the anniversary of you know, the storm on the Capitol, and like, to this day there are Republicans who are talking about how it wasn't really a coup and stuff like that, and it is the kind of thing where it's like it couldn't be more obvious what it was. So you're just like,
the president went up today and delivered a speech about how it was a terrible blemish in American history. And there were Republicans who were decrying him for politicizing it. And it's like, how do you politicize an attempted coup? Like, it's already political. What is,
Same with the comment of like, there would have been better with jokes. And like, I'll admit that there's not like Anchorman style jokes in this, but just the moment when she goes home and her parents don't unlock the door and they're like, no politics. We're excited for the jobs that a comet will create. I died laughing. I'm like, that's where we're at right now. That would, like, you would have to go home and deal with that. I don't know. I thought there were jokes in there. They just weren't. Glass cage of emotion.
Yeah, there definitely was a lack of like knee slapping jokes, but that doesn't mean that the movie didn't have a lot of levity to it. And like, that's more or less enough. Like, it doesn't. Yeah, I don't need to be rolling on the floor.
Yeah. But yeah, that was those were our comments. Thank you everyone who contributed. This is a good one, gang. I think this is what you look for in a movie, is like stuff to discuss.
Yeah, I don't know that we necessarily had a lot of fixes for this movie, but we definitely had a lot to talk about this movie.
Yeah. I mean, that's the most important thing. That makes good radio, right? Maybe a little shy on the premise of the show. Yeah, you know, this movies like this, I think, you know, as I get older, like, this is the kind of stuff that I really appreciate way more. You know, I'm still kind of a nerd at heart, and I love my sci-fi, and I love my action movies and you know, my comic characters and all that kind of stuff.
He's loving his new Boba Fett show.
No, I'm not watching
Star Wars. I think Star Wars
anymore,
fan, I think Greg Beaver.
Yeah, but like, I think that you know, I think I've kind of like oversaturated myself with sort of like the franchises and things like that, and I'm just like, I'm spending a lot more time now just kind of watching more random films and things that are like much more different, and it's just like, just them being different on the face of it is often enough for me to enjoy it more, just because I'm not watching the same garbage over and over again. And you know, a movie like Don't Look Up it's you know, it's not the type of film that you know, would this be in the theaters? I don't know, probably not, right? Like, were theaters a major thing right now? Would it be in the theaters? Maybe long enough to qualify for Oscars or something like that, but not, you know, not really. And it wouldn't, you know, like I said in the last episode where these streaming services are kind of helping us get more of this type of stuff, these more interesting films that are not necessarily done on a big budget basis, but they're tackling interesting sides of humanity. So I definitely appreciate that a lot more, and I'm kind of looking forward to more streaming movies, because I actually think that's where most of the interesting stuff is happening.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I wonder if this maybe would have. I could like. It's weird. It like I said, it broke Netflix records, but I wonder if maybe it would have flopped in the theaters. Like,
entirely possible. You know, I don't really view this as necessarily like a popcorn affair, and it doesn't have like. I don't think Adam McKay is a particularly stylized or visual director. Like, he doesn't really. I don't really enjoy it on his films on that level. So there's not really much of a purpose or reason for me to watch this movie in the theater. It's not a spectacle movie.
Yeah, that's fair. I just more meant like would some of the weird press and discussions around it have tainted their ability to sell tickets versus I already gave you my Netflix.
I think it doesn't have Spider-Man in it, so it probably wouldn't do very well.
There is always that Ed Wood crowd who will go out to watch a movie that's getting terrible reviews because they have to see it for themselves. And I think one of the reasons why it's breaking Netflix right now is because it's been getting polarized reviews. And a lot of people are like, well, I think I have to see that for myself. And like, granted, I will give you that that's probably helped by the fact that people are already paying for Netflix anyway, so it's not costing them anymore. But I don't know. I think it would have drawn some people out to the theaters to hear that that it was getting like that it had people who were like, this is a really good movie, and people who were like, this was just absolutely grating, totally obnoxious, absolute dreck. I think there would be people who would be interested.
I think I'm much more pessimistic than you. I think it would have been an absolute flop.
The new Matrix movie has been getting polarizing reviews, and it seems to be doing pretty well. So,
yeah,
granted,
I mean, it's got so much different
Matrix,
because it's a franchise affair, right? Like it has that built-in audience. You know, I don't think Adam McKay has that audience. He's not like Christopher Nolan, where he just has managed to build his own audience.
But does the cast have that kind of audience? Would people turn out to see Leonardo DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence?
I mean, I'm sure some people would, but I don't know, the star powered. I don't think it moves. IP seems to be the thing that really moves ticket sales these days, rather than stars. When we were growing up, certainly it was different. You could throw a star in any fucking thing and people would go see it.
If you had Arnold Schwarzenegger headlining, people would line up around the block to see your movie.
Yeah, I think about when we did Detective Pikachu, and I'm like, I don't know why you need Ryan Reynolds in here. You've already got Pikachu. Like, it's already infinitely more famous than Ryan Reynolds. Like, what do you? Yeah. So yeah, IP is king. Which I'm sure is foreshadowing for whatever the next movie we're gonna do is.
Yeah, might be.
But until then, please continue to follow us on social media. Wherever it is you're listening to this particular episode, give us a little review, a little thumbs up, a star, or whatever bullshit button they want you to press. Press it and subscribe, and it does help us, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, presidents don't always start conspiracies to hide apocalyptic comets. Sometimes they do it for other reasons. And Greg, Andrew, and Charlie talk about that on It's a Conspiracy. You can check that out right now, along with all the other excellent podcasts at albertapodcastnetwork.com.
We're back to our every 2-week schedule. Keep an eye out on our social media feeds for an upcoming poll on what you want us to do for your next movie, or for our next movie.
Until then, I'm your host, Liam Creswick.
I'm Scott C. Bourgeois.
I'm Greg Beaver. Keep watching the skies.
No, don't look up, Greg.
Oh, right.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Bonkink.
I'm Andrew Paul.
And we're the hosts of the Well Endowed Podcast.
The Well Endowed Podcast is produced by Edmonton Community Foundation, or ECF as we call it.
ECF provides grants to charities through the endowment funds we create and manage with our donors.
Hence the title of our show, The Well Endowed Podcast.
Every month, we bring you a collection of stories and interviews with fascinating guests who are working to make Edmonton a strong, vibrant city to live in.
Through these stories, we look at the space where endowments intersect with your communities.
So if you're interested in the people and issues impacting your community, check out thewellendowedpodcast.com.